Okay, so this is something that I talk about a lot, either in my individual work, asked to speak somewhere. So it's not uncommon for people to get stuck in their role and to not be sure how to move forward. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective of where I'm coming from. So my background's in coaching psychology and organizational consultancy. So I actually am used to seeing both sides of the coin. I help HR teams, people and culture teams to work with people more effectively, and I help people to work more effectively within the organizations. So one of the things, maybe just to kind of give you a sense of, is these are the kind of organizations that I've worked with in different capacities over the last number of years. And today's presentation is going to have 3 parts. We're going to look at insight, why do I hate my job, the choices that we have, and I'm going to point you towards action. One of the things when I'm working with people around their career that seems to be neglected is a bit of a strategic insight. So a lot of career decisions are made on reacting, and they're made on getting away from something or trying to pursue something. They're very rarely made from an understanding of who somebody is, their strengths, their preferences, the best options for them as a person and their family and their future. A lot of the time it's reactive. So what we're going to look at, and just like the name of the title, when we're in this position, it's really hard to be strategic. So I'm going to talk us through a couple of strategies to help develop insight, consider, and then inform your action. Okay? A couple of things to consider now during COVID and any other time is some of the maybe bigger motivations that could be behind your desire to move jobs, or the fact that you hate your current job. So one of the things to think about is situational, and this can be both work and personal. So if there's a situation at work, like you got a new manager you don't like, or a manager you loved left, or you're under particular pressure at home, the situation may be colouring how you're viewing your work and your role. So it's important to think as another piece if you're having a difficult time. Bullying is one that I name always, because sometimes people come to me thinking that they need to improve their clear that what's happening in their workplace is actually undermining them and it doesn't support them moving forward. And then there's task orientated. Some of us hate some of the tasks we have, and some people love the tasks they have. So it might be that what's happening with your job is around tasks. And so it's our why, what's impacting us now and in regular times, if there's ever such a thing. The personal stuff is really important. Sometimes we weave our worth into our work. So if we're really struggling with feeling kind of value or feeling successful, then we may actually put that all onto our work, but it may sometimes be reflecting what's happening at home. And then there's the organizational culture, and that was just mentioned in the previous talk.
In the background.
So I can hear some talking there in the background. Is everything okay?
Happy to do that.
Okay, so we go back. So one of the pieces that we're going to look at here now is, why do you hate your job? So if you're listening live, pull out a pen and paper or your phone, take some notes. If you're listening to the recording, do the same thing. Often career choices are reactive, and they're either about us settling for some kind of safety, or they're about us getting away from something that's threatening. So we need to think about what is pushing or pulling us if we hate our job. It's easy to confuse the personal needs with career needs, and I've just mentioned that a second ago. One of the books that's really helpful is by Dr. Tony Humphreys, called Work and Worth, and it can help us think about the pressure we're putting on our careers and to differentiate and untangle a little bit of our personal and professional satisfaction. The other thing is that sometimes we make choices that will reduce our immediate anxiety, either keep us busy or will give us some kind of relief, but maybe it won't move us towards something meaningful. And the other thing that has an impact is that we often use the same stuck or in this career rut in an attempt to get out of it. And actually that's one of the biggest challenges, is what brought you here often won't bring you to a better result. And that's why we have to think a bit more strategically rather than just reacting to the role. Because if we're just reacting to the role, we could recreate the situation. And I've heard people change roles again and again to find the same dissatisfaction in each of the roles. And if they'd been more strategic, they could have made more effective changes with less effort. So it's something to think about when you are thinking about your underlying why. So some of the things you need to consider. Okay, so when did you start hating work? What happened? What is missing? What do you want? What had you hoped for the role? And this can also be what had you hoped for the role, the organization, or the industry. Because when I work with somebody, we have to look at those three layers, because what might be causing you hassle may or may not be the role. It may be the organization, or bigger, it could be the industry and the norms and the culture of the industry. So you need to have a little think about those in terms of why you hate your job, and just getting a sense of the context of what's happening for you now. This can sometimes be challenging because it'd be much easier to blame the job or to blame the manager or to kind of focus on one thing than it would be if we were to actually focus on what we need to focus on, which is what's happening for me, when did it happen, what's missing, what do I need? So that's really important questions to consider. And if you can do it with the help of somebody else non-biased, like was mentioned in previous talks, that will also be very beneficial. Okay, so here's a quick activity. You can take your current role and you list out 3 things you love about the role, and then you list out 3 things you hate. And the reason for doing this is you're starting to create a bit more data around what you love and hate about your role, instead of the hate, because we have a negative bias and it takes a lot of energy to focus on the positives. It's as valuable for you to know what the 3 things are that you really value about your role. So if you list out the 3 things you love and the 3 things you hate, you now have the beginning of some data to think this through. What I would say about this piece is, once you've done it for your current role, if you want to be really strategic, go back and look at all your other roles, do the same thing and look for patterns and themes in those answers. That will set you up for making better decisions and to help you understand whether the role is the issue, the organization is the issue, or the industry is the issue for you. So the next thing that you need to think about is, what choices do you have right now? So what a lot of us do is list out our choices as in get a new job, don't get a new job. But before we go near that, we need to consider a couple of these things. So we need to consider how clear we are need. That's the starting point. We need to think about some default beliefs. So some of the default beliefs are, I can only get this kind of job, or I work in the public sector, so I can't work in the private sector, nobody will want me, or vice versa. I've only come from the private sector, the public sector I'm not aligned for. It could also be default beliefs about your capacity, thinking, well, actually, I'm only good at this, or I wouldn't be good at that, or I wouldn't manage the politics involved in that company. So you have to think about that. You have to consider your intentions. Again, why do you want to move right now? Why do you want to make new choices? What are the needs behind that? You then need to look at the immediate, long, and medium-term needs. And here's a little trick. Always start with the immediate needs, because they're the things that are getting in your way from even thinking clearly or making strategic decisions. So start by acknowledging what the immediate needs are, then jump to the long-term needs. We'll talk a little bit more about them in the next slide, and then you look at the medium term. So I'll hold that for the next slide. Think about your location. So if you're based in Ireland, just basically most of the industries, bar a couple, thrive in Dublin, and there's both more competition and more opportunity. Whereas if I compare to people I work with in Galway or Cork, the location has an impact on the types of organisations they can access directly if they're going to turn up to work. Luckily, that's flexible at the moment, and it's starting to become a bit more remote working orientated. So that's something that we can start thinking about when we think about location. Is my industry set up, or is my role the type of role I could work remotely from an organisation based in a different location? Your default approach. So some of us apply for every job under the sun and throw our CV and cover letter at everything, and others try to 100% match the job description. You need to look at your default, effective it is. So again, you have some real good practical data to work with. You need to understand your industry. So there are some industries that are very restricted and have some very typical norms of culture. And then there's other industries that are more flexible and inclusive. And you need to think about that when you think about how you're going to approach the organization or managers or present at the interviews. You need to have a kind of insight into what they're looking for. Financial services have a very particular way of working. Legal services has another particular way of working, versus sales and marketing or branding. So different areas will have different norms and different things they value. And those different industries will have those different values. And when you understand them, you can present yourself aligned with those values really well. A really important one is your supports. One of the big challenges is that the people that love us don't necessarily have the skills to help us make good decisions. And while they can be really good emotional support, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best career support. So we need to think about that. Who are you going to for support, and what kind of support are they equipped to give you? Not just that they want to give you, but that they're equipped. And then the last one, which is often the one career coaching focuses on the most, but is actually one of the last steps, is your skill set. And the reason that it needs to be one of your last steps is that actually your skill set can be both grown, developed, expanded. And so while you need to know what skills you currently have, you also need to know what skills you're going to develop. But that isn't really restrictive. And that's why it's the last thing you look at, because when the other compartments of that 9, so when the other 8 pieces are correct or are working for you, that 9th one is far more effective. And that way then you don't get sucked up, like a lot of people, into doing every training course under the sun, but not necessarily moving forward. It can bring you around in circles. You can have lots of qualifications, lots of certificates, lots of experience, but not necessarily the kind that you need to move forward. And that's why that's what you look at last. Okay, so here's how you focus. I did touch on it there briefly, but basically with the immediate, what you want to look at is what's driving you nuts, what's getting in your way, what's frustrating you. You need to be clear what's limiting you from being strategic in your thinking. And then you also need to have a think and a bit of an honest reflection, how much of this belongs to me? So there are some things that you'll see are repetitive in your experience in life. And if you're trying to resolve them all the time externally, you'll go from job to job, role to role, organization to organization, and still have the same experience. And so it's really important before you decide to move jobs or to complain or to do anything drastic that you really think through what belongs to me here. And that way then you're not undermining yourself and your future. And then the reason we go to the long term is that a lot of our bigger motivations for career are actually quite personal and internal. Again, a bit like the last speaker spoke about success. So you need to think about, what lifestyle do I want? What feelings and experiences do I want to create? Who as a person do I want to be? What do I want for my future? So you actually need to come away from this notion of having a definite goal in your career ambitions and actually first see what you're trying to be and what you're trying to create. And then link, this is the piece that takes a little bit of support, you then link your immediate challenges and needs to the bigger picture, and that fills in what the medium term looks like. Okay, so here's a practice. So it's a very simple practice you can do for yourself at home or you can do now, but basically you think about, what are my responsibilities? What are my concerns and fears? And what is my hope or focus? So what are the things that I hope for, or I get excited about, or I tend to give time to? And then what you need to do is, when you've brainstormed these in a mind map, you need to come back and ask yourself, what are my top 3 priorities for the next decision that I need to make? And this helps you prioritize the importance of the values and the strengths, your fears, your responsibilities, and your hope. And it allows you to be really clear on what's going to make this decision, because you wouldn't be stuck if that was really clear. Because usually what we're trying to do is have everything that we want met in our decisions. And we don't always see that there's a development process towards it. There's a strategy we need to develop to move and accumulate more of what we want, and to be able to disassociate and move away from less of what we don't want, really. So that's the practice. So here's the tricky piece. I was sitting here thinking about action, and I realized that one of the big challenges in career coaching is that people can be really active in their action and not always effective in their active action. And what I mean by that is, you can be really busy doing lots of things, lots of training, updating your CV, chatting on LinkedIn, attending career coaching, attending career talks, attending webinars, and still not be aligned or strategic in your action. And so that's why the exercise we just talked about in terms of priorities is really important, because action, what we're always looking for is the least effort and the best outcome. And that requires the action to be both aligned and strategic. Whereas if you're just taking action for the sake of taking action, you're going to find yourself in a very different position. Because what's going to happen is, you're going to be a very busy person with lots to do, but with very little ability to get the results that you want. So you can find yourself quite stuck by that. if you're trying to develop a really clear sense of aligned and strategic action, the exercises that I've listed off previously are the way to develop and decide the action that you need to take. When I'm working with clients, one of the biggest things that come up is that they're taking all this action, but they aren't actually as clear as they need to be about their preferences, their priorities, their concerns, whether the challenges they're facing belong to the role or belong to the industry, or whether the organization is the challenge. And the other piece that feeds in a lot when I'm working with clients around action is that people constantly go and upskill and get qualifications and certifications, and they may not even be relevant for the roles that they're aiming for. And what that can do is it can build up this real sense of imposter syndrome and not good enough, and this sense of being rejected repeatedly. But that's happening because it isn't aligned and strategic. And so when you're applying for roles or you're considering leaving your role, what you really need to think about is, what is my real why? What does a really good outcome look like? And then how does that align to that bigger picture, which is who I want to be, the lifestyle I want to have, the experiences and feelings that I want to have. Important part of career coaching or career development isn't just that you're reacting to the now that's bothering you, but that you're actually moving beyond that into making decisions that are going to be good for you now and in the coming months and years. And that's true for anybody working from the very start of their career, although at the very start you've got more data to develop, which means you've got to collect more experiences and get more insights and experiences of organizations and industries. It's still true that you can still start gathering that insight, which then informs your clarity, and it helps you then to think about your choices and the action that you want to take. So it is really important that when you're thinking about your career, you think of three things. You think of the clarity, the choices, and the action. And that allows you then to have more of a strategic view on your career. So if you have any questions or you're interested in a free consultation, you can visit my website, which is silewalsh.com, or you can just pop me an email to ask me some questions. There's a good few articles on my website around and on my podcast, and it has articles and content on the perfect career strategy, developing as a person within your career, and all those other kind of developmental parts of career development and strategy that we don't always think about when we're hating on our job or dying to get out of it. And equally, you can find me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and you can have a chat with me there. I share an awful lot of the material there as well.
Okay, Sheila, thank you very much. That was really interesting. And I think it's the kind of, it's the type of subject that people will certainly be able to identify with. And I think all of the items you brought up there will be of great help to people who find themselves in a situation where they're in a position that they're not that happy with. And thank you very much. If I can ask you, say when people are coming to you with, concerns and questions, what's the biggest issue they face when they're coming to you looking for some help and for some guidance?
So I think the biggest piece is that I tend to see mid to late career professionals who have been able to progress up the ladder, but not necessarily strategically thought about it. So they may end up in roles that aren't necessarily satisfying for them, or they might actually end at the top of their career and feel like there's nowhere to go next. So what do we do? So a lot of the challenges that come up is this sense of kind of success, this motivation to thrive and to do and to be effective in their work, but also feeling a disinterest or disengagement now. And it could sometimes be the very first time that they've actually ever thought about their career and themselves as a person, and how they interrelate to each other. And then the other thing and this is a big one in Ireland, depending on the industries, is finance. So I have seen a lot of people who are being completely underpaid in their roles just because they kind of accepted what the organisation has said. And when we do within their industry, becomes really clear that actually they're a good 20 to 30,000 below average. And so then we work on either getting that improvement or seeking out a job that has that. So when we're not rewarded well for the work we're doing, we tend to be more disgruntled with the work and we tend to be more frustrated, but it may not actually be the job. It may be the feeling of disrespect or not being important. And so that's one of the things that I see happen an awful lot at the moment.
Okay, and you mentioned people in their mid to end level of the career. Is that what you said? So would that be people in their late 40s, early 50s type thing, or are you talking about maybe people a bit older again?
So it's interesting because age isn't the piece. It's usually where they are in the ladder of their promotion. So maybe when they started early on in their 20s, they thought it would take them a couple of years to get somewhere, and they may have been far more successful than they were expecting. Through opportunity, chance. So usually what I'm thinking is mid-30s upwards, because there are, you know, some people are in their 50s and aren't midway through their career yet, just in terms of the ladder. I think we've lost Kevin. We have. I'll keep talking about that. There we go.
Oh,
we have you back.
Hi there. Back, yeah. We had a slight connection issue. Yeah, so that was interesting. And would you ever recommend people coming to see you at the start of their career, or from a career advice point of view, is that just too early for people to come for looking for advice?
Yeah, so it isn't too early in the sense of if they're unsure about whether they're in the right career or not, and they want. It's too early. Like, I have a lot of people contacting me from college. They need to turn to their college opportunities and their universities, because they have career guidance counsellors who are designed to help people at that stage of their journey. The way that I work, you'd need to have a number of years, not a lot, like at least 5 years in industry, for us to be able to use that data to make a good decision about your kind of future options. So you do need to collect data. There is a bit of time and experience required.
Okay, Sheila, thank you very much. Would you like to just give us your email address and your website once again?
Yep, so it's info@silewalsh.com or team@silewalsh.com, and it's www.silewalsh.com.